Good afternoon and welcome to the second interactive webinar of the EUCAD 2020 Symposium, which is organized by the European-funded Arcade Coordination and Support Action and co-hosted today by the EURTICO Academy. I'm Stefan Dreher. I'm Senior Manager Innovation and Deployment for Connected and Automated Driving at EURTICO ITS Europe, and I will have the pleasure to moderate the discussions today. I'm also coordinating the European Commission-funded Arcade Coordination and Support Action, which is organizing the EUCAD Symposium. So today's webinar will focus on the current status and challenges in safety validation for automated vehicles, with a particular focus on human factors. And to talk about that, we will have a panel of leading experts from the field, so from consumer testing organizations, as well car manufacturer, suppliers, and testing institutions. But before we start with the presentations, I would like to say a few words about EURTICO, the Academy, and the Arcade project. EURTICO is a public-private partnership bringing together 8 mobility sectors, all working together towards one common goal, which is the development, the promotion, and the deployment of solutions and services to make mobility cleaner, safer, and more efficient. Today, we have about 120 partners from these 8 sectors, which you can see on the screen. So this includes mobile network operators, public authorities, research organizations, service providers, suppliers, traffic and transport institutions, user organizations, and vehicle manufacturers. Among our activities, we are involved in about 20 European-funded projects on research and innovation, and as well piloting and deployment. And we are hosting 8 self-funded deployment-oriented innovation platforms. We are also organizing the ITS congresses when they are happening in Europe, and co-organizing them when they are happening in the other regions, so the Americas and Asia Pacific. Another activity which we recently launched is the EURTICO Academy, which is hosting today's webinar. So this is a new activity where we are developing training material based on our expertise and that from our partners on the different projects and activities we are involved in. There's already some material available, as you can see on the right. And in order to learn more about it, I invite you to consult the website below, eurtico.com/academy. One of the projects that EURTICO is coordinating is the Arcade Coordination and Support Action, which is, as I mentioned already, organizing today's webinar. Arcade is a project funded by the European Commission that started in 2018. It is building on a long legacy of coordination and support actions that started already in 2013 with the VRA, Vehicle Road Automation project, followed by the CARTRE project, and finally Arcade. All these actions had the main objective to align research and innovation activities in Europe and support the harmonization of the deployment of connected and automated driving in Europe. So the project involves 23 partners, but it relies strongly on the associated partners. We have about more than 50 today, and we have the large network of experts. We have about more than 1,000 experts following us for the moment. The project is structured according to 3 main pillars. The first one is the network. I already mentioned we have this large network of stakeholders which meet on a regular basis. So this can be at the occasion of workshops like we have today, but we are also co-organizing with the European Commission the EUCAD conference. We are also organizing project consultation workshops where we invite all the projects working in the domain in Europe to exchange lessons learned and knowledge. We also are involved in the trilateral European, US, and Japan cooperation, and we are representing the European stakeholders there. A second pillar is the thematic area. So we are working with all these experts on challenges which correspond to thematic areas. with this next year of EUCAD, we will align these thematic areas with the clusters that are being looked into by the future CCAM partnership that will be launched by end of the year in the frame of the Horizon Europe framework program from the European Commission. So we will support this CCAM partnership in developing priorities for the strategic research and innovation agenda in the future. Because this is one of our main objectives, is that all this work in the end leads to updating European research and innovation roadmaps. All the knowledge we are gathering as well is fed into a knowledge base. So that's one of the main achievements as well of our project. We have created an online knowledge base. You can see the address below. This knowledge base is really meant to be a one-stop shop for all the information about CCAM related activities happening in Europe and beyond. We include at the moment more than 200 projects that can be categorized according to the thematic areas they are working on, but as well the use cases, the function, the services they are testing or piloting. We have as well overview of regulations and legislation. We have roadmaps and as well information about evaluation methodologies and data sharing frameworks. So this is still work in progress, and we are continuously updating this knowledge base, and we are of course very happy about any feedback that you have on that. Then I mentioned another activity, important activity that we have as well in EUCAD is that we are co-organizing the European CAD conferences together with the European Commission. This conference takes place every 2 years. The last one was organized in 2019 in Brussels. And in between the conferences, we organize symposiums. So the symposium is a smaller event where we have only a few workshops, but where we focus on really still key challenges that we want to solve and discuss with the expert community. This year, the symposium had to be cancelled due to the COVID situation. It was planned to take place in Helsinki in parallel to the TRA event, but we have decided to organize it online through a series of workshops like the one today. So the first workshop took place in May. It was focusing on physical and digital infrastructure. Today we have the second workshop, and in fall 2020, so towards the end of this year, we are planning 2 other workshops, one on aligning views on terminology and common descriptions, which should hopefully take place early October. And the last one would be on sustainability of transport. So discussing on how automated driving can actually support sustainability. So please stay tuned. All the information about these webinars and conferences is published on the connectedautomatedDriving.eu website, and we will update it regularly with information. That being said, before I go to the presentation, actually, I also wanted to quickly mention some rules and the process for this webinar. So first, the webinar is being recorded. The slides and as well the poll results and recordings will be shared on the Connected Automated Driving website. And for the questions, because we want to keep this webinar as interactive as possible, because the idea was originally to have the physical workshop. So for that, we have chosen to use the Slido tool, where we would like to ask you to post all your questions. Please do not use the chat box on the GoToWebinar tool. Please use only Slido. The advantage is you can run it on a separate tab on your browser, or you can run it on your smartphone to post your questions. For that, please open the slido.com webpage and enter the event code, which is EUCAD2020. Would like to invite all of you to do that right now so that we can, because I would like to make a first test. So we will ask you a first question, which is about where are you or your organization based? Because we are referring here to the country. It's an open question, so you can enter the. Okay. think that's an interesting information for all of us. All parts of Europe are well represented. And we have also the US. I mean, of course, Kelly is also there, so I should have said good morning. Okay. Worldwide, that's nice. Yes, indeed, we are. Okay, we have about 40 votes so far. So then I would like to go to a second questions, which we will let run in the background while I will continue the presentation. So the next question is, what are you hoping to get out of this workshop? So the questions quickly popped up, but if you are connected to Slido, you will see the question there and you have enough time to answer. So I think then we can go now, in the meantime, back to the topic. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the topic of today's webinar is what is the current status and the challenges for safety validation. Safety validation is a key piece to achieve a safer and more secure transport systems, as in particular foreseen with the introduction of connected and automated driving on our roads. However, it's really a complex matter. There is a need to involve different types of testing, so with commercial testing, but as well type approval testing. And in this webinar, what we want to do is to first start looking at where we are with current driver assistance systems and the challenges for consumer testing and manufacturers, in particular in balancing the technology aspects with the human factors. Then in the second step, we will look into what is needed in order to create a commonly accepted safety validation framework. So there will be presentation on ongoing work on harmonized tests and validation methodologies, as well as research activities. So we'll have two research and innovation projects that will present after that. So first, let's go to the presentation. So the first speaker of today is Kelly Funkhauser. Kelly serves two roles from the Consumer Reports Auto Test Center in Colchester in Connecticut in the US. She's as the program manager for vehicle interface testing, as well as the head of connected and automated vehicle. She evaluates the in-vehicle experience of infotainment systems, ergonomics, and connectivity. Kelly has a master's degree in cognitive psychology and studied human interaction with vehicle automation, as well as distracted driving. So Kelly, the floor is yours. Okay, we cannot hear you.
Are you ready?
Okay, yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you for the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone across the pond. I am in the United States, and it is bright and early here for me, but I am very happy to be here, and thanks everyone for coming. So if you're not familiar with Consumer Reports, we are a nonprofit organization based in the United States, and we have been testing vehicles for several decades. And we are a little bit unique in our vehicle testing program, different from some of the others here in the United States, in that we purchase all of our vehicles anonymously. Whereas some of the other organizations may receive vehicles from the automakers and manufacturers directly, we use secret shoppers to purchase all of our vehicles. And we also purchase the trim level that is the most common, the largest volume purchase. So we may not necessarily get the vehicle with all of the bells and whistles, but we get the one that is most representative of the population of the market. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of background on that. And we do well over 50 different tests on every single vehicle we purchase. Takes about a month to do all of those testings, and then we publish our results monthly in a magazine. And okay, we can go to the next slide. Maybe. There we go. So as was just mentioned, this may fit a little bit better with the October agenda, but here in the United States, we have had this issue for several years, and I have heard that this is also a common issue in the European countries as well as pretty much around the world. In order to even speak about these technologies and features in vehicles, it's really difficult to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. And so we have developed this coalition of other consumer advocacy organizations as well as engineering organizations and come together and created this taxonomy. So this is a glossary that you see on the screen that was originally published in November, so just under a year ago. And since then, we've had PAVE and SAE, our most recent members, that have signed on to this glossary here. And what this is it's a consumer-facing document. So as you can see, SAE is a standards organization largely made up of engineers that write standards for engineers. But it was very important that we had them come on board and make sure we understood a lot of the engineering perspectives in creating this taxonomy. And so this is a somewhat of a dictionary that we are advocating for all manufacturers to begin using, as well as many of the advocacy organizations are already using, so that we can ensure that we're speaking about the same thing, given that the widespread names and marketing campaigns can sometimes cause confusion even within the experts in the industry with all of the different names and descriptions of the technology. So this is out there, and it seems as though this will be addressed shortly. But if you want to see this, then it's called Clearing the Confusion Document, and consumercr.org, consumerreports.org, either one of those will bring you to this if you want more information there. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so more than just the taxonomy and terminology and descriptions that are causing confusion out there, I wanted to set the playing field here in our way of thinking about these features. And what we have learned over a few years of studying owners and surveying them, owners of vehicles that have a plethora of driver assistance features, everything from blind spot monitoring and automatic emergency braking to some of the latest, more advanced systems, autopilot, ProPilot. I know those names are slightly different in the European countries, but those are the most popular ones here. And so I just kind of want to explain how we look at these features and set the playing field here for us. So what we've learned is that there are basically two different approaches to creating lane keeping technology, which seems to be the most confusing. So I picked this example to talk about briefly here. You can see two different pictures here. On the left, we have a system that has been engineered to keep the vehicle in the center of the lane. And this approach is using steering that is applied when you start to cross this threshold. So you can see these orange boundaries, where as you sway one side to the other, it applies steering to try to keep you in the center of the lane. And while you're in the center of the lane, you don't feel much resistance of steering. So you're driving, it may ramp up as you shift to one side or the other. And on the right, you can see this other image where it's the approach is that the automated steering is applied all the time. So it's actively trying to keep you in the center of the lane, perhaps making minor deviations to the steering to really try to keep you as centered as possible. And when you're in a system that is designed this way, you may feel as though the steering wheel has some torque on it, and you may, depending on the level of torque, feel like you're fighting the system as you may want to deviate or move to one side of the lane. So what we find is that consumers don't necessarily understand the differences between the engineering of these systems, and frankly, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. Both of these systems, in terms of actual performance, if you were to put these on the road, put these on the track, and stack them up against each other, they may have very similar results in terms of center lane deviation, but the experience of them may be a little bit different in your expectation. If you're fighting the system, if you think the system is kind of helping you when you deviate the lane. And so these boundary boxes also that you can see, these orange lines, vary widely across the industry. They may be wider or narrower. Perhaps on the left image, it may be a very narrow orange line that's just touching those lane lines. And so you have a lot more play in the lane before the system activates. And so it's pretty clear that there is a wide spectrum of how these systems perform. And all of this is being said that as the technology is advancing, we have begun really assessing these systems kind of stacked up against each other, regardless of which methodology and engineering they've used to approach building these systems. And we're finding that consumers are not necessarily wanting systems that don't perform well, and the expectation is that the system is going to try to keep the car centered in the lane. And so systems that may have a narrower band on the left type of a system are potentially not helpful for a lot of consumers. So we are testing these with the goal in mind that we're looking for a system that is keeping the car pretty well centered in the lane. Of course, some deviation in play is necessary if you're going around a large truck or a pothole, but that's kind of the goal of where we are in our testing and the logic behind it. So I wanted to just set that record straight real quick, and we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so this slide here shows that back in 2018, we published a report where we looked at these 4 different systems, and we tested a few cars with each of these systems that were pretty much making the headlines in media for the systems that had the most capabilities. Whether or not they actually did, these were kind of the ones that are the named systems that are very well recognized. So we developed some testing protocol, and you can see that we have it 5 different categories here. And since then, we have begun to expand this testing. And this summer, we've actually just completed a larger batch of vehicles, and we'll be publishing these results later this fall. But just to give you a little bit of information into these categories, what you can see here is the first category is capability and performance. Obviously, we're looking for systems that are competent enough to be able to qualify to be kind of in this assessment. So ones that can at least try to hold the vehicle within the lane and have adaptive cruise control, which are basically the building blocks of self-driving. I know there's a lot more to it and a lot of nuances, but we are assessing the capability and performance along those lines of what I explained with the lane keeping systems before. And then our next category is ease of use. And this score is looking at the controls of the vehicle in terms of how easy it is to engage, how easy it is to adjust the perhaps the speed or the abilities of the vehicle, and also looking at the displays. So what kind of feedback is the system giving to the driver about what mode, what state it's in, what it's seeing? If it's making calculations, are you able to check those against the real world and what you see? And third, we have clear when safe to use. This one, we're kind of setting it up against its own ODD. So we look at the operational design domain that is prescribed by the manufacturer of these systems. And we are assessing whether the system adheres to the ODD that they have set for themselves. And we look for systems that lay out the ODD very clearly. So we find when we read these boring owner's manuals, which I don't recommend doing, but unfortunately I do, that it's a lot of legal jargon and it's very, very vague, which isn't helpful to consumers to understand when and where the appropriate places to use these systems. And if the systems aren't designed to lock the driver out or not engage outside of those parameters, it's not necessarily easy for consumers to remember all of that information in legal jargon, even if it was confusing or not to begin with. So we look for if the ODD is clearly written out and understandable, and then if it adheres to that as well. And then fourth, we have keeping the driver engaged. And this is very, very important. And I think even more important as these systems become more capable and competent. If we're going to have these systems, which I am a huge advocate of, I would love to have a self-driving car where I can take a nap and it'll drive me to my location safely. But if we have these systems that aren't able to do that, then we need to ensure that the driver is engaged. And this is largely done through driver monitoring, and driver monitoring at this point in time is basically camera-based. And we have, and I know in Europe you have this other regulation where if you have a system that has automated steering, there's a requirement to have a warning come on and tell the driver to touch the steering wheel. Our thinking is that that isn't necessarily sufficient to ensure the driver is engaged. There are a lot of hacks out there and devices that you can purchase to trick this system. And it really isn't monitoring if the driver is really even awake. Sometimes the weight of your hand or something else is enough to counterbalance the torque of the car to turn this warning off. So the systems we have out there with eye tracking aren't perfect, but those are the ones that are on the market, understandably not very invasive in order to test and assess attention. There are a lot of other invasive methods, but those aren't necessarily feasible or practical. So what we have right now is eye tracking, but it can certainly improve. And then the last one is the unresponsive driver. And if we believe that the philosophy of creating these systems is really with the goal of safety. So if we're creating these systems that are potentially better than human drivers, they have more sensors that people aren't capable of detecting, you know, with radar and things like that. Developing them with safety in mind is absolutely imperative. And in the case of a driver becomes unresponsive, maybe they have a health condition and they become incapacitated, or they've been driving for a very long time and they fall asleep. In these cases, we think that the systems should be there to help the driver when they need it most. And so we're looking for systems that are able to adequately warn the driver and then apply the necessary escalation process to bring the car safely to a stop, and potentially move it over to the shoulder as well. Dial an emergency number or an SOS contact. Those are also very good things to be able to do. If it escalates to that process, we think that it should be able to do that as well. And that's what people are really looking for. We have survey data that show that that is kind of the top feature that people are looking for. Less so these lane keeping and adaptive cruise control systems. Of course, they're nice to have, and we understand that they're going to get better. But what people are looking for is a car that's able to keep them safe. And we have these technologies, and so we think it's absolutely important to make sure that a car that has a lane keeping and adaptive cruise control system is able to help the driver when they need it most. So that's what we test in that category. All that being said, these scores here, again, are from 2018. And we can go to the next slide here. Oh, it's missing. That's okay. It was just a pretty picture of the track that I took yesterday. But we are going to be publishing results of the next set of cars this fall. There it is. And we also, I just want to point out really quickly that we have been working with Euro NCAP, Richard, that it will be speaking shortly. We want to ensure that there is harmonization within testing organizations, whether that's within the United States and outside of the United States as well. The manufacturers may have difficulty designing systems with all of the crazy regulations and differences in what these systems are allowed to do on the road and aren't allowed to do. And so we have decided that it is really important to establish this relationship and work together in order to set metrics and recommendations for the industry in a cohesive manner to hopefully make it safer for everyone get all those different perspectives from across the world, and also really to ensure that manufacturers are able to create these systems that have been well vetted and aren't spending their time creating multiple systems that aren't as good. So that is where I will end, and thank you very much. Excuse me.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for this very interesting presentation. I like in particular the fact also that you mentioned this work on the taxonomy. I think that's also something we are working on in Europe, and in particular in the EUCAD project, because we definitely think as well that you need first to make sure that we are all talking about the same things. So we are also looking into bringing together all the different glossaries that exist, trying to give and bringing these definitions together. So it's we should definitely liaise on that as well with you. And I think from you had a poll planned as well that you wanted to ask the people on or the attendees. So I propose we ask the question now while we have a first set of questions. So you were interested in asking the attendants if they had already experienced driving with different vehicles offering level 2 automation.
Yes.
And then if yes, I think you would be very interested, of course, to hear which global automaker has the best advanced driver assistance systems currently available to purchase.
This is extra interesting to me because I usually only have the United States perspective, and seeing that the majority of the attendees here are in Europe, this is really exciting for me. Okay, it looks like we have Tesla, BMW, and I don't know is up there high as well, which I like when people admit that they're not quite sure. Maybe you don't have all the information. You know, you're not in this job where you're able to access all of these different vehicles, and it's confusing out there with the marketing and the media in what these cars are capable of. And so I think we have a very similar answer here in that Tesla consistently comes out in the top of these opinion type polls as well. And as you may have seen in my previous slides, Tesla was one of those systems that we tested, and it came in second place because it does have very good capability. It performs very well on the road, but it doesn't necessarily have all of those safeguards in place that some of the other systems do, which we certainly value safety over convenience. And of course, the competence matters, but safeguards in order to make sure that you're designing these in a safe way and putting features out there that have been tested are very, very important.
Okay, I think maybe we can leave this poll running while we look at the questions, and we can come back to the poll in a few minutes. So we have 2 questions. So the first question from Alessandros. So can you go into more details on how the testing has been done to reach these scores?
Yes, so for each of the systems, we test them both on the roadway and on our track. And we do quite a few tests with the abilities of the adaptive cruise control and the lane keeping systems. So we're not necessarily looking for the system that has the closest to 0 center line deviation. We're looking at the systems that are able to stay well within the lane, but also allow the driver to collaboratively steer with the vehicle. So it's important that the driver maintains the ability to shift within a lane or go around a pothole without the system disengaging. We find that even though it's such a simple task to re-engage the system in most of these vehicles, it becomes a nuisance when you do it repeatedly. And so we're looking for systems that are able to collaborate with the driver and be a team player, as well as their competence and ability. And for the adaptive cruise control as well, we're looking for the range of its performance in terms of do we think that the distance settings are appropriate and would make most consumers happy? Is the close one too far away, and it just becomes, you know, all of these vehicles are cutting in traffic and it's not a system that you even want to use, things like that. So let's see. And then, yeah, I think I went into detail on a few more of those, but the report is published on consumerreports.org, and we go into the testing methodology for each of those sections as well. And we will be reiterating that in our report that's coming up as well.
Okay, we have a second question as well, asking if you have had also spoken with the insurance industry to make sure that the ADAS systems, or which ADAS systems they deem are effective.
Yes, so we work very closely with IHS, which is in the United States. It's the Insurance for Highway Safety, and we collaborate with them in these discussions to try to understand which systems are safety, which ones are convenience, and try to get real data on that. And what we are finding is that there is this clear delineation between features. We see automatic emergency braking, particularly with pedestrian detection, as being at the forefront of safety technology. Blind spot warning is in the top as well, and we find that drivers love blind spot warning. It's something that isn't intrusive. It comes on when they need it. It's kind of the gold standard of a safety system. And we find forward collision warning as well to be helpful. And then once we start getting into the adaptive cruise control, but really into the lane keeping systems, we find that the data just we're not there yet. It's hard to capture that data in actual collision rates and from the insurance companies, because the systems are so hard to monitor if it is equipped on a vehicle. At least in the United States, we don't have a very good reporting system to know if the vehicle was actually manufactured with the system or if it was an option. And then also you have to know if drivers are even using these. And what we find is that with lane keeping systems, drivers tend to not use them very much compared to the other systems. So it's hard to capture those data.
Okay, so and then a last question, because then we have to go to the next presentation. So it's from Emma. So you mentioned indeed that it's very important to have to keep the driver engaged. And then you mentioned there are different systems, and you said that the torque input in particular from the driver is not enough to ensure drivers is engaged. Did you base this on empirical data?
So we make the assumption that if drivers are able to trick the system, people are pretty smart and they'll find a way to do it. And it's much, much easier to buy a device to hang on your steering wheel or to rest your hand or something heavy on the steering wheel, which then can trick the system into thinking you're applying torque. With the camera-based systems, it's much harder to do so. So although we don't have empirical data, we've kind of looked into this to see if any exists. We're basing this largely off of the people being pretty smart and able to trick the system if they want to, and so that's why we're much more camera-based.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. We have other questions, but we propose to keep them either for the panel discussion, or we want to make sure or reassure everybody that all the questions we will try to answer them. If we don't manage to address them during this webinar and during the panel discussion, we will also try to answer them afterwards, and the answers will be published in the proceedings that will be available on the Connected Automated Driving website after the webinar. So I would like to thank Kelly again for the presentations and the answers, and go to the next speaker. So the next speaker will just try. The next speaker will be Michael Leung-Aust from he's Senior Technical Leader on Crash Avoidance at Volvo Cars Safety Center. So Michael Jung is a senior technical leader. As mentioned, he has a track record of applying research on behavioral science into crash avoidance innovation, and he implemented several innovations to minimize distractions, improve warning and avoidance systems, and crash risk analysis on naturalistic data, and recently in data mining as well as safety impacts of self-driving cars. Michael, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and good morning, afternoon to everyone. I realize I don't have such a cool background as you and Kelly did, but you'll have to live with that. I am also a cognitive scientist by training and interest, and today I'd like to spend a few minutes on the subject of how do we know the driver is in the loop, in particular in connection with these, the systems where the car is kind of driving and you're still the driver. So actually you're driving, but some people may not actually realize they're still driving. So we've done a bunch of experiments on this. So I'd like to report on those. I'll just be brief to the overview, and all of this is published stuff, so you can go read the papers later. The links will be provided at the end. But I think the really basic thing that we think about a lot here at Volvo is the reason or the underlying principles of these systems. And one thing I would like to highlight, and which this presentation is shooting to, is really we try to develop driving assistance, not ride assistance. I think that's a key difference from other approaches. But if we click forward one step in this presentation, I guess many of you have seen this graph before. It's called the irony of automation, the classic irony of automation. And this goes well beyond driving. It actually says that for any type of human and system interaction, the less the human has to do and the more the system does, then the less attention the operator is paying to the system. And if you're paying less attention, it's much harder to get back in the loop and help out should anything go wrong. So the problem developing driving support is to make sure that you stay on the right side in this equation. So if you look at the graph, you don't want the system to be too good, because then drivers might think that the system is capable of doing a lot more than it actually can, and then they end up in trouble. Now, for long, it has been in this business like implicitly assumed that as long as you keep your eyes on the road and hands on the wheel, you're going to do something if you run into trouble, even if the car like automatically took you to that point. Because braking and steering away for objects in the road, that's like so fundamental and autonomous or automatic behavior, if you will, that nothing can really break that response behavior. Unfortunately, it's wrong. So if we go to the next slide. So we did a bunch of test track experiments back in, well, a couple of years back in something called the ADEST project, which was on how to develop a methodology for doing safety benefit analysis of self-driving vehicles. So basically, can you let this car out on the road or not when it's self-driving? The setup is very simple. You have a test track. That's the one over to the right. You run a lap. If you're the test participant, you're in a car that can drive itself. And it does so really well for half an hour. There's no need for you as a test participant to intervene. So you get in half an hour of perfect driving. Now, after that half hour, the car encounters one of three conflict objects. Those are the one in the pictures at the bottom. It's either a balloon car that's either in the lane or partially in the lane, or it's this sack of debris that's on the right. And the way you get here is that your perfectly self-driving car is following another lead vehicle, and the lead vehicle will cut out and go around this object. So what we really looked at in these tests is, what do drivers do? And very concretely, what do we need to do to make sure that they don't run into the balloon car or the bag of trash? And you would think this is a very simple experiment, and you would think everyone would just steer around this little object. They're driving in 70 kph. It's not fast. It doesn't require any super maneuvering. You just steer a little to the left and go around. You have a lead vehicle ahead that just did that, so there's no question what you need to do. So this was initially more designed like a study to verify that people actually do this. Problem is, I think we were wrong. So if we go to the next slide. So we thought it might matter what you tell people about the system. So they had 3 levels of detail when told on the system limitations. They were either told, you know, this is a kind of self-driving system, but you need to supervise at all times. Here you go, off you go, bye-bye. So very low level. Medium, then you get 2 sheets of paper, like the equivalent of a manual to read through, and we check that you read through. The high level, and this is probably interesting, that was half an hour of classroom training on system limitations, on sensor limitations, showing example pictures of what the system would not recognize, including pictures almost identical to the bottom 3 pictures. So half an hour of classroom training. And then we had 3 supervision reminder conditions. So one group didn't get any reminders at all, but others were either getting visual attention reminders. So if they looked away for the road for more than a couple of seconds, we told them, look back. And some of those who got attention reminders also got hands on wheel reminders. So they were told that if you don't have your hands on the wheel, please put them back there because it's necessary to have your hands on the wheel in this drive situation. So this is what we tested. 3 levels of instructions before you did your drive, 3 supervision reminder conditions. And what we looked at was, would anybody crash a car or this trash bag? So next slide. There we go. Now, the interesting outcome of these studies was that 3 drivers out of 10 crashed in every condition. So low instruction versus classroom training, no change. Supervision reminders versus no supervision reminders, no change. 3 in 10 ran into this object, or actually let the car run into this object. That is a pretty high number and a little worrying. And this is why we talk about designing driver assistance, not ride assistance. Because if this is a problem that may arise after half an hour of perfect driving, well, you get the picture. We can look at the next slide. So obviously, we had to ask the people who crashed, you know, what were they thinking? And I should tell you, now the people who participated in these tests, they were, you know, viewed themselves as pretty capable and hardworking and good individuals in many aspects. None of them were really impressed by themselves that they let the car crash. They didn't feel good about it, and they didn't really feel they did their best. So it was not on purpose. They were rather ashamed afterwards. But the ones who did crash, they all reported high trust in the automation to handle the conflict. So they could say, you know, well, I just expected the vehicle to brake, or it felt very safe in this half hour of driving, so I didn't realize something could happen, or you know, the vehicles was driving so well, so I couldn't really imagine that it would be unable to see something right in front of it. These are pretty interesting answers, because you have to remember that prior, you know, half an hour before, they've been told that they need to monitor for anything suspicious and deal with it should the car miss it. So in half an hour, you can go from that position to this, where you have a comment like, well, it was driving so well that I couldn't imagine it wouldn't break. So we can go to the next slide. So our takebacks from these studies is really that supervision reminders, like, you know, have your eyes on the road, have your hands on the wheel, they are a very good prerequisite for being able to do something, because if you don't look at the road, you have no idea what you're doing. Hands on wheel, maybe. People are pretty fast at getting to the steering wheel when it really matters, even if they don't have their hands there to begin with. But this, what we call the automation expectation mismatch, it still develops if driving performance is perfect. So half an hour of really good driving means for some people, and I mean, this is not intentional, it's not like they decide, it's extrapolation from this performance. Even though they were told beforehand that this is not a perfect system, they cannot help themselves. They will develop this extrapolation that because the car is driving so well, it's going to deal with everything in front of it. It's pretty much like if you're getting into a taxi at the airport. You know, if the taxi driver takes off and you see that this person can actually keep the car in the lane and the speed reasonably steady and the distance to the vehicle in front, then you then automatically extrapolate and think that, well, if something happens, this driver is going to brake or steer away. So this expectation develops in people, even though they don't want to or shouldn't. And there's a term for it in the literature. It's called learned trust. It comes back in other domains where if you experience perfection for long enough, then you can't help but start extrapolating capabilities to the system that it may not have. And this develops independently of your training and whether you have your hands on the wheel or not. So if we look at the last slide of this, next one, please. Of course, the implication for self-driving systems is really twofold. You should either highly reliable system, really highly reliable, so go for full AD, or you need to be able to make sure that you can detect that the driver is out of the loop and then do something, you know, push the driver back in the loop somehow. And this is why we are at Volvo talking a lot about how we turn this into drive assistance or driving assistance rather than ride assistance. Because of course, the best answer to this is really that you, as a driver, still feel that you're driving the car. You're not being driven. And if you're still driving, all your normal security measures and behaviors apply. And then the question is how we make that an effort or an offer where you still get something out of it for having the system turned on. That was this in a brief overview. You have the links at the bottom where you can go and read the rest of the research if you're interested. All of this is open access, so just click download and read on any given day. And that's that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for the presentation and for sharing the results of this interesting study. So what I understand from the study is that even though, I mean, all the systems are there and also the monitoring and drivers have been instructed, there are still crashes happening. And I was wondering, before we quickly look at the questions, in how do you design now? How do you recommend now the car should be designed based on this detected AEM since you mentioned that the prompts didn't work in your study.
Sorry again, the prompts?
You said that the prompts didn't work in your study?
Well, they worked to the effect that the drivers had their hands on the wheel and their eyes on the road. What it didn't do, so it's really, the problem is assuming that prompts lead to response. That assumption is wrong for some drivers. You will have your eyes on the road. One behavior of drivers who were mentally checked out and crashed were that they were actually staring a lot more on the road than you typically do when driving. They had like 95% of their gaze time was straight ahead on the road. They were definitely looking. And then when running into this conflict object, you could see their hands pull back to brace. So it was like they were in the passenger seat, only on the wrong side.
How would you classify the system you tested according to the SAE?
That's probably like a level 4 or 5 because it did perfect automation on half an hour in terms of performance. But then, of course, we told them it was supervised driving, so maybe a level 3. Then again, we really don't do well with the SAE levels because bottom line, it's either unsupervised and you can be ride assisted, or it's supervised and then you're driving. So the levels don't make much sense because people's minds really don't respect SAE levels at all times. To be a little blunt on that.
Okay, now thanks for that. Let's have a quick look at the question, because I see there are some questions from the audience as well. So the first one from Yannick is, did you also take a look at the driver's fatigue scores similarly to the trust evaluation?
We did. No correlation, unfortunately. What we did see in some other studies were some extreme cases of fatigue when you're in this type of supervised, high performance supervised AD. Different study, but people kind of fell asleep right away. It was really weird. But in this case, crash outcome did not correlate with fatigue scores. I see the second question here. I think there may have been later research after this with this that has done similar stuff. I don't know any other projects who have done very similar research. I would be really happy if others did. I would have found that what we have found is like experiment artifacts, and that we can still safely assume that drivers will respond even in supervised automation and just deal with stuff. But as for now, we have to assume that we need to detect when they're getting out of the loop somehow. I see the third question here too. It's really, prompts won't work. What you can do is kick them out of the automation loop. So just make the function unavailable for a while, because then you really have to drive. And of course, if you have someone who is in the passenger seat mentality mode, throwing control back at speed is possibly not a super good idea. So you have to manage the interaction design some good way, but still kicking people out of access to driving support if they're not really up to supervising it is probably a good idea.
I think we can take the two last question quickly because it's.
Yeah, we need to move on. Let some others talk.
But I think that one is interesting. Yep.
Sorry, which one?
So there was one. Let's take the first one, because how long before a car can follow the car in front around an object?
I don't know. It may be possible if you let it, but there's regulation, at least in European places, you can't leave your lane. So that's a really tricky one. And ALKS, don't know. Awareness is one thing, but this ability to respond as if you were driving, that's the one we're after. And that's not really situational awareness per se. It's a more specific type thing. And I don't know if ALKS is going to cut it on that. And for automated driving, I think the suggestion is it's really two levels. Either it's automated, at which point you're the passenger, or it's not, and then you're driving. And then we need to make assistance a good thing for drivers. So let's not do ride assistance. Problem is really, if you're looking to design something that goes very straight in lane and has a very good lane keeping, then it's pretty much a steering robot. And then of course you're this type of problem than you would be for something where you need to interact more frequently. So interaction frequency is something we're looking at closely now. How often you as a driver need to do something. Okay. All right, should we move on to the next?
Yes, thank you very much, Michael, for your presentation, for the answers. Yes, let's indeed move to the next one. So the next presentation is by Richard Schramm. So Richard Schramm works for the European EUCAD assessment program, where he's technical director, and amongst other activities, he's the technical lead for active safety and automated driving. Before that, he worked at TNO Automotive, where he got involved in vehicle crash safety research and development in both passive and active safety fields. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. And again, thanks for the invitation for us to present here our latest and our plans on assisted driving and how we're going to evaluate this. So if you go back further 2 slides already, then I know I have slightly too many slides, but I think we'll manage within time. So in 2018, we launched our first release on AD. And AD can be seen as automated driving, but especially at this moment in time, we're still in the assisted driving mode. One of the things here is that we generally looked at vehicle systems from the manufacturers offering those systems. We nearly covered all of them. And I think the main conclusion in the next slide of this publication was that we were really looking for this balance. And I think also Kelly mentioned this, that we look for the balance between the vehicle assistance and the driver engagement, where the vast majority of the vehicles we tested at that point in time were in, for our perspective, in the good ballpark, where it was clear that the driver was leading, and that it was also clear that the vehicle was trying to assist, not take over the driving task from the driver. One of the main messages we also wanted to make sure at that point in time was that people understand the limitations of these systems, and that none of the cars, even then and not even now, 2 years later, which seems a huge amount of time for the technological development, are even close to being automated. So the driver is still fully in control, fully responsible as well. And I think people should need to learn these systems to drive. And if you have learned and understand the system limitations, basically all of these systems are very good support systems that will make driving safer. So for the next round, and I think in between, on the next slide, we also decided, like Michael mentioned already, we also believe from your EUCAD side that for consumers specifically, the SAE levels don't make sense. They're very hard to understand. And we decided to come up with our own levels, being assisted, where in short, the driver is fully responsible, but shares the control with the vehicle. Automation is the next leap there, where the vehicle takes over responsibility and has full control. And we even added a level of that we call autonomous, where it's very similar to automated, but in that case, different to automation. In autonomous mode, the driver simply cannot take back control because the vehicle is doing everything, and the driver effectively is the passenger, like in a taxi. So those are the levels we are using internally at EUCAD. And on the next slide, you can also see that we then have made a matrix out of this, where we also specify from our end the domains that we typically drive in. And to put things in perspective, at the moment, all systems we see, ignoring parking for the moment, are within the highway assist systems. There's nothing else available at the moment. With the updated regulation coming up in Europe, at least, you can argue that we'll make the first step to highway automation, but we are still at a very, very small coverage within the whole, what we call AD matrix. So what are we going to do next? If you go to the next slide, we wanted to do, and I think this is one of the success stories of EUCAD in general terms, we believe that by writing clear test procedures and assessment procedures that will result into the performance and the system designed as we see it most safe. We set up a system where we really focus on this balance that we already used previously. So we want to balance the driver engagement and vehicle assistance. The more assistance you have in the vehicle, we don't mind, but it needs to be balanced by more driver engagement to ensure that the driver still knows its role. Again, mentioning that this all is still assistance systems where the driver is responsible. There's never a transition of control in this case. And as a safety organization, we believe that when the, let's say, comfortable support by the system ends and finds its limitations, it shouldn't mean that the vehicle should not respond to the situation anymore. It should use its safety backup systems like AEB, lane keep assist, emergency lane keeping, to still keep the vehicle in control, maybe uncomfortably by harsh braking or harsh steering, but it should help the driver avoiding a crash or mitigating a crash in extreme cases. So for driver engagement, we have a couple of items which I can just quickly run through. If you go to the next slide. It starts with consumer information, simply naming of the system. The system should identify or clearly mention in its name that it's an assistance system and not any automated system, autopilot, ProPilot. Those kind of names we simply don't like because they are sort of misleading in what they actually are as a system. They may evolve over time, but at the moment they're not there at all. Also, marketing materials reviewed. It's hard because, of course, we're not going to hold manufacturers responsible for what other people are doing with their vehicles and put onto YouTube. So we look at official marketing material, not to be misleading, and clearly state the limitations of these systems. System status, I think it's need to be important for the driver to understand what the status of the system is. Well, it is supporting in the background or not. You can argue that for assistance systems, you don't need to know, you will feel it, and effectively you are driving still yourself. So you will know whether the car is going to help you in time. For driver monitoring, that's really where we believe that the biggest leap forward will be, and the requirements will be developing, and the protocols will be developing to ensure that we have higher level of assistance. You need direct driver monitoring. That's a given for us. You can not have higher levels of assistance than what we see today without direct driver monitoring for the vehicle to know what the driver is seeing and looking and doing. Finally, I think similar to what Kelly already mentioned, and I think in general terms, we are very much aligned with consumer reports already in the way of thinking. And I think that's, I must admit, this was done independently of each other, and we are at the same ballpark in terms of requirements and ideas on where we as a consumer organization also believe assistant driving should be. And we also have the actual pothole test to identify what the vehicle response is to driver input response. And what we typically don't want is the vehicle to shut down support when the driver starts avoiding an obstacle within the lane, because that gives the hint to the driver that the vehicle says, I'm not working with you, it's either me or you driving. While in assistance, especially in these type of systems we're seeing today, there should be a balance and a hand-in-hand cooperation rather than a handover of control or transition of control, which simply shouldn't be in those systems. So we go to the next slide. We also have, so I think we can skip this one just for the sake of time. Also this one, system status, this needs to be clear to the driver where the systems are and how they are helping. In vehicle assistance, so that's the next big area, pillar within the balance that we're trying to find, is how much assistance does your vehicle provide? And that goes from, does the vehicle help you set the correct speed limit? Not only if it is actually speed limit, but also if there is tight curves, crossings, roundabouts coming up, that the vehicle will already adjust your speed to an appropriate speed, which may be lower than the actual speed limit. We're also looking at the ACC performance. That's a very large chunk of what we're doing. How does the vehicle respond? And in summary, we don't look at how well does the vehicle do within 60,000 miles on a straight highway, and will it keep in the middle, like Kelly also mentioned. We're specifically, and that's why we do all of our tests on the test track, we're specifically looking at critical events. I think anyone can make a system that will be able to keep distance to a slower moving car ahead without a critical relative speed. And I think that's what some of our results show as well, that the moving objects are easy enough. So we put in stationary objects, late cut-ins, late cut-outs, to really put the systems to the test and see how they behave. Because those are the critical events where if you have no driver engagement to the correct level, there the vehicle will crash ultimately. So if you go to the next slide, we then go, I think, again to this, to this balance. So we balance out this driver engagement and vehicle assistance, where effectively we look at the vehicle assistance score, but the vehicle assistance score that we award to the vehicle can never be higher than the driver engagement score. So if your driver engagement is very poor, you will never score more than your driver engagement score, even if your vehicle assistance is perfect. And the reason for that is that we want to have the driver engaged in these systems, because again, and I cannot stress it too many times, that the driver is still responsible and needs to drive the vehicle. But in cases where the vehicle assistance may end and unfortunately the driver isn't paying proper attention, we still want the car to do its uppermost best to help the driver avoid the accident or the collision. And I think that's why we're doing it in the safety backup system. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, I think we can skip this one. Yeah, so the safety backup is then the second pillar in general that adds to the total AD score that we give to a vehicle. For there we have loss of sensor input, emergency assist, and collision avoidance. I think there will be, if you go to the next slide, I can give you a slight hint on where these items look into. So loss of sensor input is effectively what does the system do and how does the system inform you in case there is a buildup of ice, heavy snow, where the radar or camera will not see anything. Now, at the moment, we are doing this in a very blunt way. We simply cover the sensors instantly, which is a bit of a unrealistic way of covering, but we get a first hint of how these systems respond to this. In emergency assist, we are very keen, and this is a very big proportion of our score as well, that as soon as the regulatory warning sequence has timed out, we want the vehicle to keep supporting the driver, because you can either do two things as a vehicle manufacturer. You can either assume that the driver is making misuse of the system, which I cannot believe how you can do this after a very annoying warning sequence. So if the driver is still out of the loop and not taking back control after the whole warning sequence, which is legally required in Europe, we believe that the driver or the vehicle manufacturer should assume the driver will never come back. He is physically not fit to take back control, and he should bring the vehicle to a safe stop. Even though we are limited to do this within lane, that's the best thing forward, because simply releasing the steering and longitudinal control of the vehicle means that you have a 120 kilometers an hour bullet uncontrollable on the highway, while the vehicle has means of slowing down himself and staying within the lane as the best alternative after the driver is out of the loop. And finally, we look in the same way as ACC, we look in collision avoidance, which effectively are the same scenarios, but where the ACC didn't do it comfortably, we look at the AEB performance to ensure that the driver is still supported. And I admit the driver is fully out of the loop in this case, because he had warnings all over the place. He is not driving, but we still want the vehicle to do its utmost best to avoid the accident, whatever capabilities they have. So that's why we have the safety backup. And then if you go to the next slide, we will publish our second publication on this with the accompanying protocols, the test protocol and the assessment protocol, hoping the manufacturers will pick this up and take this into account. And we are in close relation with the manufacturers. They have been on our working group to develop these procedures and equipment. And again, like last time, we have a couple of newcomers. So Peugeot, Renault, and VW weren't in the first release, but we also have other vehicles from the same manufacturers from the first release in our publication on the 1st of October to demonstrate the quick development of these systems as well. So only 2 years, but a new generation vehicle comes typically with a new system that will have I can give you a heads up, it has a significant change in system performance already. and also the newcomers coming up with, let's say, affordable cars that you and I can buy, are offering these systems, not only very high-end vehicles that are unfortunately not within my budget to be driving around. So with this, I think, hope to have given you a sneak preview and a hint to look at our website for the 1st of October when we launch the second batch of results on this topic.
Thank you, Richard, for the presentation. Because we are running out of time, I would like to go directly to the questions from the audience. I've seen that there are some questions.
Sure.
There was one from Bob Hellman and Stacy as well. So what is the difference between performance road and performance vehicle in your rating system?
Yeah, performance road, we're probably going to change those words in a publication. So performance road means how does your speed limit information function? How well does the vehicle know its speed limits, and how does it support to make appropriate speeds? Performance vehicle really looks at the ACC performance. So the vehicle responding to another vehicle. That's the main difference there. So if we look at the second question, is tracking of passengers required as potential source of disengagement? No, the driver is driving, the passengers will be there. So we really believe that we look at the driver itself. We're not interested that much as what the passengers are doing, even though it may get the attention away from the driving task from the driver.
So does it mean that you can get the maximum AD score even without any camera, for example?
No, it's already implemented at the moment that if you want to, we deliberately left it out. So the maximum score you can get is not the maximum we will have in the future. You can only get the maximum score if you ultimately have this direct driver monitoring system.
Okay.
And to answer Rob Hellman, yes, I think it's feasible. I think we need to acknowledge that there's differences in regulation and also in infrastructure. They are significantly different within Europe and within the US. But where we can, we will certainly harmonize and ensure that at least procedures, may not scenarios, but procedures and the way we look at the systems are in the same logic. This time I'll answer Emma's question. Can you describe how you weigh systems versus driver inputs and driver state monitoring? So assistance for us is it has to be balanced. And I'll be the first one to acknowledge that our driver engagement score there is not a lot of science behind it, but looking at how we scored the vehicles and from our experience as let's say experts in this field, I think we were doing a pretty good job of at least stressing to the public, but also to car manufacturers that if you want to go to higher levels of assistance, you need to have more input and more emphasis on keeping the driver in the loop and giving him understanding on how the systems are working and what he can and cannot do with them. So I think it's developing protocols as well. We were learning ourselves. We have good relation with the car manufacturers and discussions with them because they are ultimately designing the systems, and we can learn a lot from each other to make sure that we have a safe transition towards higher levels of assistance and maybe even automation at the short term.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm afraid we have to go to the next presentation, but again, for the remaining questions, we will make sure to answer them even after the webinar if they are not addressed in the panel.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard, again. So our next presenter is Roland Galbas.
Yes. Thank you. I hope I can be heard. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think there was a poll launched in the meantime. Okay,
The slides are visible, yeah.
I'm putting it full screen. So yeah,
okay.
Quickly, Roland works at Robert Bosch GmbH in Abstatt in Germany in the chassis system control and advanced engineering team. So he's a project consortia lead as well of the German-funded project VV Methods from the Pegasus family, and he has a diploma in electrotechnics and control techniques from the University of Kassel.
Thank
Roland.
you for the presentation. I'm honored the opportunity to give a short overview about our project, VV Methods, and please next slide. I will give you a short overview also about the family of Pegasus, where we come from, then 3 main goals, and then one first result we get from this project. Please next slide. So I hope or expect that some of you already have known the project Pegasus, which had in focus to get basic methods for the release and for the tests of level 3 vehicles, which have focus on functions on the highway. And the focus of this project also was the complete, let's say, look at the complete system, the complete vehicle. Or within Pegasus, a lot of very important results has been finished, and our aim was to develop this strengths in 2 projects. Then later on, this is VV Methods, the one I explain at the moment, and set level. So VV Methods focus on, again, as Pegasus, on the methods of level 3 to 5, and especially then with the focus on industrialization. And set level 4 to 5 was formally planned as a part of project, a simulation part, and we split it off for several reasons. So we have 2 projects, but we base on set level, which gives us the simulation ability in our project VV Methods. So focus now is VV Methods at own, and I come to the next slide, please. This is just a glance of the partner. It's a very strong German public founded project. You see all these partners, many of them have been partner in the Pegasus project. Also, we need 4 years, and we have nearly 50,000 million and budget. So it's a big project and very concerned for industrialization. Next slide, please. So this is a first glance at the main goals. We built on Pegasus, and we have still, let's say, to finish or to answer the question, when can we say that we have tested enough? This is still a problem because of the complexity of the open context, which is the biggest challenge we have for highly automated driving. The driver takes over responsibility on the one hand side for an open context, what means changing environment. And the next thing, the next goal is purpose industrialization and main purpose scalability. And what does it mean for us? We need interfaces. We need interfaces in between the car, between the sub-elements, between the sub-systems and components and the vehicle. This enables scalability of automated driving. And the third goal is also focused on industrialization, but of course an enabler too. Simulation has to be or has to take over a big part of the release and the test of such a vehicle. But not only this, we need, let's say, at the end, a complete seamless set of evidences to release a car, and all of them has to put together in a seamless way. This is very important. So simulation will take a big part, but also that we can put it all together. This is the glance, the first glance. Now we have next slide. When we take the the goals one step deeper. Now you see the V model and you see the 3 goals again. And the first goal, how do we reach this? By understanding the traffic phenomena, we will achieve several clusters of tests, which we then can say that is finished, or that we then can say under certain conditions, this is tested enough. And doing this, we have to involve the law perspective into these considerations. And what we get out then, for example, is kind of like a nominal behavior. Maybe you know this from the RSS methods and others on. So kind of like what is really asked, what is claimed to such a vehicle to behave, because this is not certain at the moment. And let's now look to the next goal, goal 2, industrial interfaces. I come to this on a result later on, the argumentation. We need a systematically approach of breakdown of the claims we have in law and for the driving task for the nominal behavior. And we need this systematically approach. If we have this, we can do component exchange, we can do variant release, and we can, with this, enable that a different manufacturer contribute to one car. This is also, as I said, a main instrument for scalability for industrialization. And the third goal, as I said, shift to simulation, is not to develop the needs and points for simulation, because this is doing set level, the other project. Our goal is to get a seamless integration of all the layers you see on the bar, from the simulation to partial simulation as hardware in the loop and to the field tests. Everything has to be seamless. Our goal in the project is to become it seamless, because this seamless testing also enables industrialization. These are the 3 goals in a glance, or in a deeper glance now. And now come to a very important first result where we base on. Please, next slide. This is also started in Pegasus as the safety argumentation. We consider the safety argumentation as the structured backup framework for the release of the vehicles. And because of that, the open context gives us a very complex requirement. We have to structure this, and we have to structure this over the industrial stakeholders. So here you see 3 layers. This is the first element. The layer above, we call it the social or traffic layer, defines the claims and bundles the claims on the one hand side from the real traffic, where we get data, and the laws. For example, NHTSA and other requirements, Ethic Commission in Germany, what we have to cluster and to understand what is behind these claims. Can we put them together to have a common understanding what is actually asked from the society to the behavior of our vehicle. And then you see, this is still in the definition phase. We come to a technical layer. The technical layer then is differential by the design of the vehicle, for example, the ODD. In this layer, then you define the ODD, and if you have the ODD, we come to the level to break down the requirements in form of contracts. We call it technical contracts. And these contracts then have to be decomposed. I come later to this. You see here, for example, we put it in function, component, and distribution. And then we say, okay, this function we decompose into planning, actuation, perception. And then if we have defined what we really have to explain to a car, then we come on the last level This is where we get the evidences in the test infrastructure below. And you see here on this side, for example, that not only, let's say, simulation or data can be an evidence, also an audit is of course an evidence, as you know, from the three pillar approach of UNCE. This is all included as the main structure. Let's give next slide, please. I want to give a kind of like a short introduction about what we are working on this safety argumentation. I told you that between the first and the second layer, there is a definition of the vehicle, the ODD, for example. But the question at the moment is what is the format, what is the structure to define such a vehicle? Because a lot of knowledge, preconditions, assumptions are in there to define a vehicle. And what of these assumptions has to be proven, and in what hierarchy and format it has to be defined. This is, for example, a functional architecture can be used as such a framework. And then later on, you see the decomposition part of the contracts. What is really important for us where we're working on is, of course, the methods already said, but really important are quality metrics, common quality metrics, which are part of the project to define what we really define there. A common language, as Kelly and the others also mentioned. We have, of course, the same thing, but one level deeper, not, let's say, only the function. We want to define, for example, what we mention as what is an error, on which level, and so on. And all these definitions, final technical definitions, what we need to define contracts. And when we then have the contracts, then we finish and we can say this is on the next level. We can say on this level we can need evidences, and then we are able to describe which evidences we actually technical need. And then comes the last layer, but I don't go into deep now at the moment. Next slide, please. I want to explain why did we choose the safety argumentation as a systematical structuring element for our project from Pegasus. One is that the open context and the complexity it comes has to be covered together with the law perspective. And if we do not cluster it and structure it, we always will stumble with law conditions and other safety conditions. And if this is not structured, it is unable to release such a car in this high complexity. And next thing is using these technical contracts, you see assumptions and guarantees and what is needed, assumption and guarantees. We use assumption and guarantees because typically every contract or every technical definition we do under certain assumption. This is what we have to fulfill, and we have exactly to say what is the guarantee. This also enables us, for example, to have the scale effects, industrialization effects, because then this is a common language for example, tiers as we Bourgeois to cover up such requirements. In the reason of for the time, because there are other presentators now, I think I will stop here. And we are really open to explain why safety argumentation. We are working on this subject, and of course on the other goals you have seen, and we have still more or less 3 years to develop in this project. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Roland, for this presentation and for this the views on the safety argumentation. As we have a bit short time, and I've seen that there are no questions so far, or maybe just one, but maybe I have a quick question for you, which is, so generally safety argumentation for automated driving is seen more as a proprietary information, and this makes generally discussions and learning very difficult between different stakeholders, in particular if something goes wrong. So from a safety perspective, what do you see as the future for the hazard analysis and automated safety and integrity levels, argumentation in particular? Should these information be made public at some point?
Whoa, I think that the hazard and risk analysis, which of course will be part of the safety argumentation, or which is one of the methods to examine this, should be opened to a third-party assessment party. And I don't think that such information would be published because there are some competitive elements in there. It should be opened if there is an issue. This is my expectation. I have but I think it will be developed this way, because you really deeply analyze some aspects, and there are always competitive solutions than in such argumentations. Yeah. So.
Okay. So, thanks. In the meantime, we have one question here from Michael. Do you think the safety argumentation needs to be designed so it can be presented to and understood by the public and non-experts?
I can imagine that some, let's say, big aspects. Why do we go in the argumentation such way? Some pillars could be open to public and could be kind of like standardized. This is what I understand, but I don't think that such a detailed knowledge should be open to public. This is, I think, the interpretation then, this is not so easy. I hope that we have standardized metrics, standardized methods, and we develop. This should be absolutely open to public, but for a certain vehicle, not. I don't think so. But this is, let's say, it's a personal estimation now at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Let's maybe just take the last question from Pete. If the safety case is not public, how can the public be reassured the car is safe? Interesting.
It is. I'm sure that as Mr. Schramm also from ENCAP, for example, we will develop some open issue or possibilities for public, that they can understand what such vehicle on safety is bringing and why. But with published such safety argumentation, which can have thousands of branches, I don't think that this is the way. Yeah, the public should be saved with certification entities as ENCAP or TÜV in Germany, which then can assess and translate the assessment results to public. This is, yeah, I think so. I think we are running out of time, because that I had an own question, but I blocked it down because I think we are running out of time. There are other speakers. Yes,
exactly. We have one last speaker indeed, so I propose that we switch back to the presentations, go to next speakers. But thank you again, Roland, for presentation, for your answers. Let's go then to the last presentation. which will be by Alvaro Arue on the importance of including key enabling technologies in the assessment methodologies. And he will speak about the Head Start project. So quickly about Alvaro. So Alvaro Arue is product coordinator on connected vehicles at the Connected and Automated Driving Unit in A+ IDIADA. He holds a Master of Science in Telecommunication Engineering and a Master of Science on Mobile Communication by the University of Zaragoza. And Alvaro is also the project coordinator of the European-funded Head Start project. Alvaro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you very much for the opportunity of being here. I will try to be brief on my presentation today. So maybe we can start with our next slide. And just a short introduction on what is a Head Start project. Very quickly, it's a Horizon 2020 European funded project. It started in the 1st of January 2019. So we are currently at the middle of the project. We reached the middle there. And if we move to the next slide, well, you can see here an overview of who is the Head Start project, who is the consortium. So we are 17 partners in which we have different types of participants. So we have, of course, research, we've got industry, there are OEMs or tier ones, but we also have associations, we have as Ertico, for example, or, for example, technical services as RDW or EPAS IDIADA, and also accredited Euro NCAP laboratories. In a nutshell, we try to bring together different sensitivities in the context of connected automated driving testing. Also, this was important to bring together the coordinators of several of the not just European, but also national projects regarding testing of vehicles. If we move on to the next slide, please. These are the project objectives. So we are working on the definition of testing and validation procedures of CAD functions, in which we are including, and this is very important for the presentation today, what we call the key enabling technologies. And in particular, in Head Start, we have chosen 3 of them: communication, cybersecurity, and positioning, with the objective of cross-linking all the different test instances. We also seen it in the previous presentation. And here we are including what would be simulation, vehicle in the loop, as well as proving ground and real world field tests. And in order to validate safety and security performance, according to what we have defined are the 3 key user groups as we understand them. From one side, what would be technology developers, this would be researchers, but also the industry, consumer testing, and tape approval. We try to bring together all these different sensitivities in order to be able to harmonize. And how we've done this, and we are doing this. So we started the project in the first stage, which was identification. So we've been working a lot in what was the current state of the art in the different initiatives on, especially, but not limited to, a scenario-based validation. And we have also worked out in the second stage with this, the harmonization. So we try to bring together what are the commonalities between the different initiatives and where are the gaps, where are the differences. We are now entering the third stage, which is more definition development. So today I'm going to present what are the methodology and the procedures which we are going to use in their next stages in the second half of the project, which are the development of the tool chain in order to be able to demonstrate the feasibility of the methodology that we have described in Head Start. We have an overall 5th point, we could say, which is international cooperation. We want to bring consensus. So it's in the nature of the project to bring together different stakeholders so we can identify what are the different needs, requirements, sensitivities in the context of connected automated driving testing. If we move on to the next slide, I would like to introduce, well, this is something for your information. You can have all the project deliverables and more information on our webpage. So if you want to know more, you can contact us or use this web address as your main point of contact with the project. Next, please. So if we move on to the methodology, well, where are we building on? This is an animation, so Stefan, if you can move on, maybe put the whole slide, okay. So where does the methodology come from? So this is coming from what would be this initial state-of-the-art analysis that we did, not just at European level, but also at international level. in which what we try to harmonize all the different projects that were ongoing at that moment, as well as past projects. There's sometimes, or traditionally, there's been a little bit of fragmentation when it comes to testing in what would be R&D projects. So we made this effort to bring all this together. Also, we were assessed what would be the different databases that are there now, that are available, and what would be the state of the art of the testing of selected relevant scenarios. So at the end of the day, we brought input from Pegasus, which has been explained today, and not so much in their follow-ups projects like DMV methods, because they started a bit later, but we are in contact with them. National projects like Move, a Japanese project like Sakura, and we also have a lot of discussions with different databases, for example, Streetwise. All this information, as I said, can be found in our webpage. You can have there a lot more detail on this. We move on to the next slide, Stefan, please. So this would be a generic approach to what would be the a chain for testing on a scenario-based validation technology. So first stage of the input data, which may come from different sources, not just from field operational tests, but there are many other different sources. These are all integrated by database mechanics into a comprehensive database in which you generate a complete scenario with a logical scenario, with different set of parameters, parameter space, and this is stored and accessed. If you move on to the next stage, that would be the testing, is where you start working with these databases to get information that you will then use in the different test instances that you may find. Simulation, proving ground, and well, real world is a little bit different, to finally, at the end of the day, evaluate the performance of your function according to your KPIs. You can move one more, Stefan. One click. But in Head Start, we are not focusing on the databases. This has their own complexity. It's a complex. What we are working more is in these last two stages of the process, more on the testing and the evaluation. But it's important, and we're also working to see how we can be interoperable with the different databases that are currently and potentially going to be created in the future. Okay. If we move on to the next slide. So, well, I will yes, put it well, there. Thank you, Stefan. So we spoke about the different stages. The first one is database and mechanics. As we were saying, this is not part of the activities that we are developing, implementing in the Head Start project, but we start from there. So, for example, we need to access different databases, and to do so, databases that will bring you logical scenarios with a certain parameter distribution, importance of the exposure on this, and to do so, you need to have a query to those databases. So, if we start moving in that direction, what we have also bring together is what do you need to be able to perform a query that gives you the information that you really need. In this case, we created these extra boxes like a driving function and use case, in which we are considering all the different elements that are necessary to make an adequate query to these databases to get the information that you want. Once you got there, and if we move below, we have this EUCAD extraction of what we call the concrete scenario. There are a lot of things on the wording, but concrete scenario, you go from logical to something that is more tangible. In this stage is where we start introducing the concept of key enabling technology in the process. So what we are doing there is that we are introducing the three key enabling technologies: communications, positioning, and cybersecurity. And with this aggregated and enhanced or additional information from the concrete scenario, we move to the next stage of the process, which is the allocation of a scenario. In this big macro block that you see there, that is called testing on the top left, we have considered what are the 4 test instances that you may have in a project, from the virtual simulation testing, virtual proving grounds, X in the loop testing, and proving ground testing. And we have another one, which is field testing. It is important to highlight here that we have a closed feedback loop between what would be the actual testing, which is in colors, and the preparation. So you need to understand what is available from the simulation, proving ground, or X in the loop testing, and what from these scenarios, which test cases you will be it will be possible to test with what you got. In the particular case on field test, it's a bit different because it's not a scenario-based validation, but you can prepare what would be the open road, the driving itineraries or routes, and all the existing infrastructure to be able to get all the information that you would need. If you move on to the final block, which is evaluation on bottom left, this is where at the end of the day, we are evaluating the results of the testing that we perform against the driving function, the vehicle, and so on. I would like to highlight here that we have also included one extra block, which is human capabilities. It's important to understand if, of course, you're working on the driving function itself, this does not give you a complete result if the human needs to be in the loop. But it's also very important to say that Head Start is not working on human factors. We had to limit the scope of our project. What we are doing here is opening the window to bring what would be more human factor testing into the complete framework on the evaluation of the automated driving. If we move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we spoke about that Head Start, it's about harmonization. So what are the things that are being done out there and how to bring them together in a harmonized way. And one of the natural ways to go on is to follow the standards, okay? So in Head Start, we have decided to follow the open scenario, open drive standards, which have been delivered by SAM. And this is basic for us for what would be the understanding of what information do we need to prepare the scenarios that we are going to test. In the particular case of Head Start, we are not working, and this is important for us, we are not changing, we are not creating a new standard for this. What we are working is to understand the necessity to enhance current standard to allow key enabling technologies to be included in the process. If we move on to the next slide, here is where we have the catch within the technology. So we've made an assessment, all the different needs. First of all, we need to consider that these key enabling technologies, I remind you, communications, positioning, and security, these are new information channels or additional information channels to what would be the driving function, automated driving, connected automated driving function. So for example, for V2S communication, this would be directly a new source. But for example, if we take into account the open drive, open scenario, positioning is a little bit more trickier because some layers within the open drive, open scenario, they already give you some information that is necessary for testing positioning in the process, but some others are not. So we have also been working into adding new parameters that should be considered when testing. Taking into account two premises. One of them, that they have to be top-level parameters. This means that they have to be arbitrary and independent of the hardware used or the technology used. And for example, in the particular case of V2X, that is a sensor. So it's not so much about the radiation propagation of the signal, but about the logical information that is coming to the automated driving function. And then we have cybersecurity. We've worked a lot in this. We've thought a lot about this in the project. And cybersecurity, it's not so easy, understand me correctly, it's not so easy to integrate. So we need to treat cybersecurity in a special way. Simple parameters can be connected to formal parameters, that's true, but the special treatment for in-depth analysis is needed. And this is reflected in the next slides, as you will see. Please, Stefan. So in the methodology, what we did is next bar, please. Okay, so we have this we have the information from the GETs, but we had to create an additional block for what would be cybersecurity assessment. So it's partially a part of the process, but we had to make an additional block that's out of the general methodology to be able to make this in-depth analysis of the cybersecurity within the vehicle. We move on to the next slide, please. So next stage, we define in Head Start the methodology, and we are now moving to the procedure. So just some wording here. A process is a set of interrelated or interacting activities which transforms inputs into outputs. This is about what you do. But when we are speaking about a procedure, is that you are going into the specification of how do you carry the activity of the process. So it is about how to do it. So we're moving from what you have to do, which would be in the process, and it's coming from methodology, to the procedure. So we get this procedure, we move it into this methodology, get into the process, we get into the detailed process, and we finally get this procedure. You might find more information on deliverable 3.1 of the Head Start project, but to give you in a nutshell what would be the procedure, next slide, please. This is an overview, short overview of what would be the high-level process and procedures behind. So we have 9 different bullet points that need to be considered. I'm not going to read them out loud, but all these stages are part of the process. They have one assigned responsible for each one of them, and some of them will not block you, will not allow you to move to the next point in the procedure before you are agree with the results and you're happy with your previous stages. So following all this approach, you finally get to the report results of the different testing. And here we have included all, you will see they're very familiar to the methodology I just explained, but they are now more detailed. So next slide, please. Yes. If we move on, we have the methodology, we have the high level process, and on your right, and being very small, you have what would be the complete Head Start procedures that should be done for a whole vehicle, for a driving function validation. Next slide, please. And now I'm starting to get to the final of my presentation. So what are conclusions? In Head Start, we did this effort to make this a state-of-the-art assessment. This information is publicly available. One of the other things that we did is to understand different terms and glossaries that are going on so we can speak common language. That the Head Start methodology, although I presented it today, and this is what we have delivered, and you will find in the web page, is a living process. So it means it's not closed, and we are still looking for experts or cooperation with other initiatives to understand where we might have generated blocking points, or where do we need to insert new points to allow other technologies to be included. So it's not fixed in stone. It's a living process that can be worked. To highlight that gets in the methodology, some of them were, as I say, not easy, but they were easier to integrate in the whole process because of its nature. But we also found that cybersecurity needs a dedicated extra path to be able to perform in-depth analysis of the cybersecurity of a driving function. Just to let you know, the way we did it is additional path. We are open to the procedures that are coming from other domains, not just the automotive domain, but for example, what would be the ICT domain, which has been very active for many years in what would be ICT. And they have a lot to bring to they know a lot indeed to bring some. Next slide, please. And next steps for the project. As I said, we are now starting the process of bringing all together into something physical that can be demonstrated. So this is the work that we will do in the next month, and finally next year, and of course this will be announced in advance, we will proceed, which will be the demonstration. So we have different use cases within the project, and we will make a demonstration of the methodology and the validity of the methodology itself. And these are all planned in the second semester of 2021 next year. And this is it from my side. Thank you very much for your time. And I guess that maybe there are some questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Alvaro. Yes, I think there's many more questions, but maybe I can ask all the panel speakers back for the panel discussions. We are normally at the end of our webinar, but if the speakers at least can stay, I would like to propose that we go on for 10 more minutes to at least have a start of panel discussion on some questions. I think there's maybe just quickly one question for you here, Alvaro, from Joseph. Is the role of expert knowledge for the elicitation of scenarios considered inferior to the data-driven approach?
Inferior, it's I mean, it's a strong word. I wouldn't say it's inferior. I think, and Roland, maybe you can add on this, all the efforts that are being done in the different initiatives towards an scenario-based validation, it's to be able to automatize the whole process and be able to perform more tests that would be more, that if you were working more from just the expert side. So I wouldn't say inferior. I think it's just going beyond what would be the expert knowledge. So expert knowledge is very valuable, but this is a way to automatize or speed up what would be the whole validation process. I don't know, Roland, Richard, you want to add on this?
I think in general terms, there is no time to wait for scenarios to be based on accidents. The technology comes so quickly that if we want to wait for accident scenarios, we have to wait 10 years, which we don't want to do. So I think there you have no other option than start with expert knowledge and go from there.
Yeah, I would underline this. So, the way should be that we think that these expert knowledge have to be, let's say, structured so that we have the analysis in advance and have not only one expert, so different expert from different, you were from the human sector, we have other experts for other sectors, and then to structure this. And of course, the experts should do it, and we should do it in a cycle. So we have to monitor the environment and what happened, and have to readjust the system in a circled way.
Okay. Thanks. I think let's go then to the panel discussion. We have already one question here from Emma for the panel. I think it's mainly intended for Kelly, but of course there maybe also Richard or Michael can add to that. So how do you balance what customer wants related to level 4, no hands-on prompts, etc., with what is actually safe?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it actually goes back to what I think all of us have been saying this whole time about driver monitoring, is that the system performance, if it's a poor performing system, may also be a form of driver monitoring. So if it's a system that is really bouncing in the lane or doesn't stay in the lane, then that by nature requires the driver to stay in the loop and is a quasi driver monitoring system. But the better performing systems require then driver monitoring because of the learned trust and the ability for drivers to become complacent on a highly capable system. And so to go back to the question, how do you balance what they want versus what is actually safe? What consumers want is a more highly capable system. I also agree that I don't understand the systems that aren't as well performing. Are they actually helpful? We don't have any data to show lane keeping systems that aren't lane centering type systems are actually safer. So I would like to throw the question out, should those even exist? So if they're not a very helpful system, people don't really like them, they tend to annoy drivers, they want a more capable system, maybe that's what they should get. But it's absolutely the most important thing then is to have an effective driver monitoring system. And that onus should be on the automakers, the manufacturers of these systems. If you're going to put out a highly capable system, you absolutely must put in a safeguard to make sure that the driver is paying attention because of the learned trust and complacency.
Okay, Richard, do you have maybe want to answer that? Or?
I think the question shouldn't be how do we balance it? I think we need to be giving consumers information about the capabilities of the systems they can buy. and making sure that they are realistic in understanding what they can buy at the moment. So the only thing we need to make sure as consumer organizations is to have people understand there is no level 4. And if level 4 comes, we'll surely have our vision on how they should look like and how we can assess them. But more prompts, I don't think that is even related to L4, because L4 does it himself ultimately. So I think we are always challenged. There's a bit of a discussion between what we will see in the future, but the consumer is something he buys now. It's nice to have him informed on what he can buy in 5 or 10 years, but that's not relevant at the moment.
And I think it's important to, I mean, just to clarify, Kelly saying better performing system, implying lane centering, that's a very technical definition of better performance. I think you need the holistic view with the driver in that loop, and the type of, let's say, vehicle control which has the best chance of keeping the driver in the loop, that's the best performance, not necessarily lane centering or whatnot, because it's very easy to go talk about steering robots, and if your vision is a steering robot, then of course many of these systems will look like pretty drunk robots, possibly half blind. But if the design intent is not to design a steering robot, then again, coming back to the importance of nomenclature and wording, we need to be careful on our side too, so that we don't, hint at better performance that make that implicit lead to people assume we're talking about robots. So it's really fascinating with the cool tech stuff and talk about machines doing cool things, but in this context, it's really easy to slip into the trap of that, leading people to assume that we're talking about steering robots when we're not.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And performance isn't just lane centering. I tried to explain that before. Absolutely, there are other metrics that go into that. Driver monitoring and engagement is definitely a huge part of that as well, and the ability to interact with the steering, right? So these systems that turn off the systems or go into a standby mode when you try to replace yourself into the off center of the lane. Those also drive the complacency as well, because the system appears to be doing much more. So yes, I was trying to oversimplify it and to a fault.
Okay, thanks. Another question before we go to the question that are here, which I think are a good closing question. I have one question particularly on personal privacy. So what are your considerations on that, looking at the issues that might arise from privacy with the increased push for logging technologies, as well as this driver state monitoring? Maybe Kelly or Richard.
I think for us, driver monitoring is a sensor and not a camera that records you. So it's a real-time sensor that looks at you at real time. At that point in time, it doesn't store anything. That's our assumption of driver monitoring. When the manufacturer wants to store things and there's other things in the vehicle that may lead to privacy issues, that's not so much in our way of thinking. We really see it as a sensor that knows the driver's state.
I agree with that. That's what we recommend as well, is a closed system where the information is live and used as part of how the vehicle is performing. And we could even go even further to say that if it detects the driver is not paying attention, then it can recalibrate the performance of certain safety systems. We don't see any of that yet. And I think there is a difference between driver monitoring in a closed system compared to watching the driver through a camera and obtaining personal information.
Yeah.
I can probably add that if all you get is a video of the driver, you really paid for something that doesn't work. No one is interested in the video. You want something much more sophisticated and refined, and preferably a single signal saying attentive. A supplier saying, I got this great, face camera, they would be thrown out in the first round of negotiations.
Yeah.
Any other views? Or Otherwise, I have a question, I think that is also for everybody regarding harmonization, because that's also very important for the EUCAD project, which is our main concern here, that we want to align views and support the decision makers on aligning regulations. So there are very many different regulations at the moment in Europe, US, China. So how do you propose that we work together towards harmonization, or at least to mitigate the differences between the different regulations, also to support the manufacturers? Maybe for Kelly and Richard to start, and then I know that the Head Start project are working on harmonization, of course.
Well, you can only harmonize where you can harmonize. You shouldn't have harmonization as an ultimate goal in general. So where we can harmonize procedures, that's of course fine. Where we can harmonize tools and methods and the way of thinking, then the infrastructure bit is something we can never solve. There's a different infrastructure in the US and in Europe. Even in Europe, between countries, it's difficult enough. So that's something that we need to acknowledge, but also even preferably take into account in the overall system evaluation. I can only state that where we can, also organizations like EUCAD, we will harmonize where we can, together with Kelly, IHS. We have good relations in Australia, in Japan, and in China. So we certainly will do our best where we can, but it's not up to us to decide on what they do in China. And I think that will always be there. And I think regulation can help as well. They are harmonizing and set the ball at one point, and we can simply use it as a basis and continue from there. But there will always be differences as well.
Yeah, it would be great if we all were harmonized on everything, but that's a not realistic expectation. And we have all of these differences in infrastructure and even culture and how we drive. And so that's not necessarily realistic, but the important thing is to maintain these working relationships and ensure that we're hearing all of the different perspectives wide and to make decisions based on those, but unique to our own jurisdiction or culture. And also, yes, we're not regulators, and it'd be great to have regulation, but I think just as long as we're all thinking about the systems and safety in the same way, then that's going to get us pretty far.
I guess we could add that you're chasing a moving target, as both Kelly and Richard have reported. What happened in 2018 is not what happened in 2020 testing. So chances of staying harmonized when tracking a moving object is that's pretty much like a military territory thing, and even they fail. So it's really difficult. And of course, if you're a consumer information organization, you want your own angle, right? Because that's what you live to design and make relevant. So I think harmonization may kill that. I don't know, but
well, I think it's a role for industry. Volvo designs a car differently than BMW, than Mercedes, than Tesla, than anyone else. So we can harmonize our procedures, but if the development and your thought process as OEMs is different, then of course harmonization also becomes difficult, because as Michael mentioned, we are trying to find or look for this moving target and try to follow him. And if you all design in a different direction, then effectively you're pushing us to state, well, what Tesla is doing is correct, and everyone else is doing it incorrectly. So I think especially the discussions with industry and trying to understand why they went a certain way in their designs is also very helpful in getting the right targets and the right protocols and requirements set up as well.
Maybe we in our project try to harmonize, but I think the problem is typically a stakeholder mismatch. Who wants to have the effort have not the gains often. So key for harmonization is that if we make something available what others easily can use and what help them, this make the key for harmonization. Of course, you need regulations on the other hand side to guide such a process, but the best way to harmonize is to make good things, practical things available that need a broad bunch of stakeholders. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for these answers. I think now it's time to close the webinar. So as a last question, I think we can ask the one from Furkan. I think that's, so if I can ask each of the panelists to reflect on maybe just very few words, what is the current topmost challenge in validation of automated driving from your perspective? So maybe starting this time with Alvaro from the.
He doesn't want to answer.
Okay, we can't hear you. Okay, then maybe Roland in the meantime.
Yeah, I think from industrial side, most challenges to cover the safety aspect of the open context in a balance to the market position of the projects, of the products. So the open context, the changing context is kind of like a real, absolutely real new jump for the automotive industry, which needs other industries to fulfill. And this is kind of like a big step to do for the industry. And yes, this is the main challenge. Yeah, the open context, the new technologies to be involved in this digitalization of the mobility is the jump. Yeah.
Okay, then maybe Richard.
Yeah, I think the most difficult thing is to acknowledge from all of us that the validation is never perfect. You will find something the day after the validation that you missed something. And I think we need to all acknowledge that the validation at this point in time is not a crash test anymore where you have a one-shot go. People will acknowledge or find scenarios where the system we say that was nearly perfect didn't work perfectly. And to acknowledge this, that this will always happen, we all need to agree that validation will never end developing and updating. You need to keep on following, as Michael said, that this ever-moving target. And that will be the biggest challenge from my perspective, to keep our assessments as we do today, not 6 years valid, keep on updating them to keep the consumer informed on the actual status today of that vehicle today.
Okay, then Michael.
Well, I think on the top level, we like to split this into problems. One is really, how do we make sure the car or the AD function, whatever it is, doesn't do human errors, and how do we make sure it doesn't do robot errors? The first is more straightforward because we have a long list of crashes which are like representations of human error. So what we do with those is really plug them into the computers, make them runnable. Then we plug in a driver model because like people crashed when they had a bad day. So what if you had a good day? We'll see the outcome and then we say, okay, the AD function must be better than that, and then we're good. We're not seeing any more human errors. So that's kind of straightforward in its own convoluted way. The other side, which is really, how do we make sure the car doesn't make new robot errors? That's more of a blank area of the map. I know people used to say that today 95% of crashes is caused by human error. Well, 80 big rollout and 93% of crashes will be caused by robots, and finding out which problems they run into in a world where machine learning is a big thing, where AI is seen as a great addition to any software, and where basically you're faced with a black box at any number of stages in the software, then this is the tricky part, I think. Human error we can deal with. Robot error we're learning about.
Thanks. And then Kelly.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that exactly, and twisting the question a little bit, but it's not necessarily a challenge in the validation metrics or process. I think what's most important is the communication to the driver or the occupant of the vehicle. And so exactly, there may be these robot errors, but the ability to clearly communicate the system status, and not only the system status, but perhaps even a little bit more information about what the system sees, how the system is making calculations and determinations, and then allow the occupant or driver of the vehicle then to check the system against their own reality, could provide insight to open up this black box and perhaps redefine the role of the occupant and driver and help them then also help the system as they become more capable.
Okay, then I'd like to give a second chance to Alvaro. I think there was a connection problem.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry for that. Complete blackout. So the question was?
The top one.
Okay,
thank
you.
What is the current topmost challenge in validation?
Thank you. Just to confirm. For me, the biggest challenge is to keep up with the challenges. So it's how do we? You said it in the different questions. Machine learning, artificial intelligence. There are different technologies that are going to come and they're going to be integrated because they can really boost up or speed up the performance of automated driving functions. So we need to have methods that are able to cope with all these changes. So we don't need to reinvent ourselves or make paradigm shifts and big changes every once in a while. So have something that it's robust enough to admit all these different new technologies that are coming into the market in a smooth way. And this has also these implications with what would be a regulation or legislation and also standardization. How do you can take all these new things and make it in a smooth way instead of having to jump every once in a while. Moving from the time when we're installing Windows 7, Vista 7 and 10 to something like now that you have different updates every month and to just keep working as usual. It's nothing that has changed. That would be for me one of the big challenges that we should target. And good internet connections, that's also very important.
Okay, thank you to all of you for these last words and for your participation. I think it's time now to close the webinar. I would just like to highlight again that we have still some surveys running on the back in Slido. So for the audience, we would be still interested in your replies as well. We can still answer the questions, so we will work on that, and they will be published together with the proceedings. So give us, of course, a few days or weeks to finalize that, but we will try to have all the questions, the remaining ones, answered as far as possible. So with that, I would like to thank you all for participating, and in particular the speakers for the additional time that you stayed, and for these extremely interesting discussions. I hope that everybody enjoyed it as much as I did and learned a lot out of that. So thanks again for your participation to this EUCAD webinar, and please stay tuned. On our website, you will get soon the information about the next webinars that will come. Thank you very much and have a nice rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.